we're talking tonight about Henry IV, Part 1. And it's one of my favorite plays, partly because its structure is so perfectly wonderful, and partly because the language is so wonderful, and of course the characters are wonderful. It yields riches however often I study it and however often I teach it. So I'm going to read great swaths of it tonight and next week. But I wanted to start by asking the following question. Let's say that you go into the CVS or something, and they've set up candy bars, and somebody has miscounted the number of candy bars and thinks that there are 20 when there are really 21. And you shoplift a candy bar, and you get away with it. They don't catch you. You walk out of the store. Nobody's any the wiser. They are not missing a candy bar because they miscounted in the first place. And you have a candy bar and nobody knows you took it. So my question is this. Is there any reality to the error or the wrong that you've committed? Was it a theft or wasn't it? Nobody's missing it. Nobody got caught. Nobody's going to be punished. Was it a theft?
Yes. Yes.
Are you guilty?
Yes. Yes.
Have you besmirched your honor?
Yes. Yes.
Now, why do you think that?
Because it's wrong to take something.
Well, I know, but it's not, there's no real damage. There's nothing real.
Because you don't get caught and because nobody gets in trouble.
That's true. I know all those answers. Yes?
Maybe in your own mind, but you haven't besmirched your honor because nobody knows about it.
Well, that's the question now, isn't it? Have you besmirched your honor or not?
Or have you done it before? And if so...
No, we're not talking about before. We're just talking about that one instance. The question is whether your honor is a concept in the mind, in other people's minds, or in your mind, whether there's any reality to it, whether it's just a word, and whether your honor is marred at all if nobody knows that you took this candy bar.
Well, the honorable thing would be to say, I've noticed that you have more candy bars here, and then...
I know that's the honorable.
We'll give you the candy
I know that's the honorable thing, but that's not the question. The question is that dishonor that you all were saying before real?
Yes.
So if there's your mind, there's others' minds, and there's the mind of God.
Yes.
But you could rationalize it all away.
Okay. So Shakespeare is going to ask this question in this play. This play is, among other things, going to include the question, what really is honor? Falstaff is going to have one idea, and Hotspur is going to have a different idea, and Prince Hal is going to have a third idea. And those three different ideas are all the main foil characters of the play, and the play is going to unfold for us the truth about this idea of honor. At the same time, those three foil characters are subtly and obviously, at the same time, embodying three principles, or the three parts of the soul that Plato articulated, that all human beings have. These three aspects of the soul, or three souls. Dante refuted the idea it was three different souls. There are three functions of the same soul, but anyway, the point is three aspects of the person, which Plato illustrated in several ways. One by the idea of a charioteer driving a chariot with two horses. One horse wild and undisciplined, and the other horse obedient and both of them strong, and then the charioteer. And the point is that in all of us there is a intelligible soul or intellectual soul, and a sensible soul, and a vegetable soul. What does that mean? The vegetable soul, that thing in us which causes us to have a body, to grow, to be a physical person in the world, in the natural world. And then on top of that, we have a sensible soul, which has sensations, thoughts, feelings, and on top of that, we have an intellectual soul, which has comprehension, understanding. And it's pointed out that vegetables, plants of all kinds, have a vegetable soul. They grow, they change, they die, they live, they die. And that's all they have. Animals were thought of as having both a vegetable soul and a sensible soul. Namely, they grew and had a body like plants, but they also had feeling and sensation and consciousness of a certain kind. And then human beings have the additional soul which governs thought, rationality, self-consciousness, awareness. Now, the reason Plato articulates this is to show that he's trying in the Republic to find out what justice is. And in order to do this, he says, let's look at the big picture, the polis, the city-state, and we'll see what justice is there, and then maybe we'll know what justice is in the individual. But later in the book, he points out that the just man is that man in whom the rational soul governs the sensible and the vegetable souls. In fact, governs the body and the desires and the needs by intellect, through the use of the sensible soul or the heart. So these are associated with organs, right? The brain is the organ of the mind, and the heart is the organ of the sensible soul or the feelings or the chest or the will, and the body is the location or the seat of the desires, the lower desires. So in order to direct those two horses, the desires and the will or the heart, to where the charioteer, the rational soul, wants to go, you need both. You need the strength of the body's horse, but you need it to be governed by the virtue and obedience of the heart's horse, or the sensible soul of the horse. And the rational soul, the charioteer, is the one who tells the good horse how to direct the bad horse or the disobedient horse in order to get where they're going. And this is another way of saying that the mind must train the heart to compel the body, the senses, to do its will. And in a soul that is well ordered in this way, and there are three characteristic virtues for each of these. The virtue of the intellect is prudence or wisdom, and the virtue of the heart is courage. And the virtue of all three, really, but including the body, is temperance, nothing too much. And when you have a person whose body is governed through his heart by his mind, which is to say a person who has both or all three, temperance and courage and prudence, justice will appear. This is what defines the just man. He is in that kind of order. Now, Shakespeare isn't trying to teach us a philosophy lesson in this play, nor is he simply a pedant of Platonic theory. But he is giving us three characters who, in a sense, in their lives and in their speech, embody these three principles of behavior. In one, the mind governs. In another, the heart, the passion, governs. The willfulness governs. And in the third, the senses and the body and the self-indulgence govern. They're complicated. They're more than that. Of course, in any human being, you're going to have all three. But what is the relation? What's primary? And Shakespeare's going to show us these three versions of how to be a human being, or two versions of how not to, and one of how to. Overlaid on this, so we've had what is honor. We're going to have three ideas of what is honor, and then we have these three parts of the soul. And overlaid on this is the whole Renaissance doctrine of the humors. Remember that the elements, since ancient times, were thought to be four: earth, air, fire, and water. And in their combinations, they produce everything in the natural world that we see. And within the human being, there was this parallel elements called humors. There's something halfway between things or substances and spirits. And they are blood, phlegm, black bile, which is melancholy, and yellow bile, which is called choler. And the harmony or disharmony of those humors within the body creates what we call the complexion, the complex relationship of all these things to each other within the body. That, of course, produces the color of our skin, but it also produces a whole nature and a whole predisposition, so that a sanguine person is characteristically going to be roly-poly, fat, red-faced, jolly, just got excess blood. And a melancholy person, excess melancholia, black bile, is going to be melancholy, depressed and miserable and sad, like Jaques in As You Like It, or Hamlet. The phlegmatic person is too much phlegm. He's just going to be what we call a couch potato, right? He's going to sit around, not have any gumption, not willing to do much, like somebody who's been smoking too much pot. And the last one is called the choleric, too much choler, and that makes a person short-tempered and quick to fight, quick to defend himself, snappy, bitter. And we're going to see the expression of these in the behavior of the characters that we're going to be talking about. Okay, that's all by way of introduction. Now, I haven't given you the names, which corresponds to which particularly, and I want you to discern that as we go. And I'll reiterate as we read. So the situation is, we know from Richard II, Richard is now dead. Henry IV is king. He's got a troublesome, wayward son, apparently. And he's opening this next play with exhaustion after fighting down a series of rebellions. So, Act 1, Scene 1, Line 1. So shaken as we are, so wan with care, find we a time for frighted peace to pant and breathe short-winded accents of new broils to be commenced in strains afar remote. No more, he says with wishful thinking, no more the thirsty entrance of this soil shall daub her lips with her own children's blood. No more shall trenching war channel her fields, nor bruise her flowerets with the armed hoofs of hostile paces. Why is this wishful thinking? This is Henry IV. Okay, all the Henry V, not Henry V, but all the Henry VI plays, and all the Richard III play is all about trenching war in England between brothers, right? Civil war. So there's a long way to go before the civil wars end, and yet he's hoping that they are over. Those opposite eyes which like the meteors of a troubled heaven, all of one nature, of one substance bred, did lately meet in the intestine shock and furious close of civil butchery, all those people who fought each other in English Civil War, shall now in mutual well-beseeming ranks march all one way. 2 spondies, 4 monosyllables. Boom, 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 to imitate the marching. You get it? March all one way. We're all going to march in the same direction together and be no more opposed against acquaintance, kindred, and allies. The edge of war, like an ill-sheathed knife, no more shall cut his master. Therefore, friends, as far as to the sepulchre of Christ, whose soldier now, under whose blessed cross we are impressed and engaged to fight, forthwith the power of English shall we levy, whose arms were molded in their mother's womb, to chase these pagans in those holy fields, over whose acres... He's getting so wrapped up in his subordinate clauses, isn't he? He's trying to work his way out of this maze of convoluted language to get us to the Holy Land, which is where he wants to go, to cleanse the blood on his hands and march all one way. To chase these pagans in those holy fields, over whose acres walked those blessed feet, which 1400 years ago were nailed for our advantage on the bitter cross. Okay? We're going to go to reclaim the Holy Land for Christ against the infidel. But this our purpose now is 12-month-old, and bootless 'tis to tell you we will go. We've been planning to do this for a year. It's useless to repeat this. Therefore we meet not now. That is for that reason. If you have an E there, cross it out. T-H-E-R-E-F-O-R. There shouldn't be an E. It's not therefore, it's for that. Therefore, we meet not now. That's not why we're meeting. Then let me hear of you, my gentle cousin Westmoreland, what yesternight our council did decree in forwarding this dear expedience. Have we got a council that's going to support this trip to the Holy Land? My liege, says Westmoreland, this haste was hot in question and many limits of the charge set down but yesternight, when all athwart, that is against it, we want to go this way and something's coming against it, there came a post from Wales loaden with heavy news, whose worst was that the noble Mortimer, you remember that name? Intended to be the heir of Richard, by Richard, descended from the female line, Philippa, and therefore a possible pretender to the throne. When the noble Mortimer, leading the men of Herefordshire to fight against the irregular and wild Glendower, Glendower is the leader of the forces in Wales, so they're going for the king to fight in Wales, was by the rude hands of that Welshman taken, 1,000 of his people butchered, upon whose dead corpse there was much misuse, such beastly shameless transformation by those Welsh women done as may not be without much shame retold or spoken of. Shakespeare doesn't say what it was. In the histories, we know that the story was, and we don't know if it's true, that the Welsh woman would cut off the genitals of the soldiers and stuff them in their mouths. Pretty shameful. King, it seems then that the tidings of this brawl break off our business for the Holy Land. This matched with other did, my gracious lord, for more uneven and unwelcome news came from the north. And thus did it import, on Holy Rood Day, the gallant Hotspur there, young Harry Percy and brave Archibald, that ever valiant and approved Scot, at Holmdon met, where they did spend a sad and bloody hour, by discharge of their artillery and shape of likelihood the news was told, for he that brought them in the very heat and pride of their contention did take horse, uncertain of the issue either way. So we know that Hotspur's in battle at Holmdon with Archibald. We don't know how it ended, but the king knows how it ended. Here is a dear and true industrious friend, Sir Walter Blunt, new lighted from his horse. Now, close your eyes and just listen to this image. Stained with the variation of each soil betwixt that Holmdon and this seat of ours. Can you see that? Stained with the variation of each soil. Every color of dirt between Holmdon and here are staining this horse. Or staining him, Sir Walter Blunt. And he hath brought us smooth and welcome news. The Earl of Douglas is discomfited. 10,000 bold Scots, 22 knights, balked in their own blood did Sir Walter see on Holmdon's plains. Okay, Hotspur won. Of prisoners, Hotspur took Mordake, Earl of Fife, and eldest son to beaten Douglas, and the Earl of Athol of Murray, Angus, and Menteith. Is not this an honorable spoil, a gallant prize? Ha, cousin, is it not? For us, England, fought for by Hotspur, Mortimer was taken, but Hotspur won. Westmoreland, in faith, it is a conquest for a prince to boast of. Whoops. He doesn't mean any harm by it, but the king says, yea, there thou makest me sad, meaning sober, and makes me sin in envy, that my lord Northumberland should be the father to so bless the son. Do you remember Northumberland? He's the one that first ran to Bolingbroke to help him become king, and he's got a son, and the son is Hotspur. And why is he called Hotspur? That really was his name, his nickname. But Shakespeare takes that and uses it for his purposes. A son who is the theme of honor's tongue, among a grove the very straightest plant, who is sweet fortune's minion and her pride. Whilst I, by looking on the praise of him, see riot and dishonor stain the brow of my young Harry. They're both named Harry. Henry Hotspur and Henry of Monmouth is the prince. Oh, that it could be proved that some night-tripping fairy had exchanged in cradle clothes our children where they lay, and called mine Percy, and his Plantagenet. Those are the two last names. Then would I have his Harry and he mine. I would change my son for this guy. He's a hero. He's a fighter. And my kid is, well, where is he? We'll see. What think you, cuz? But let him from my thoughts. What think you, cuz, of this young Percy's pride? Now we got the downside of Percy, of Hotspur. The prisoners which he in this adventure hath surprised, to his own use he keeps, and sends me word I shall have none but Mordache, Earl of Fife. What? Now, you're fighting for the king, and you take prisoners. Whose are those prisoners? The king's. Now, he can tell you to do what you want with them, if he wants you to, or he can keep them, or he can release them, or he can kill them, or he can do whatever he wants, or he can have you do it. But it's up to him to decide this. And this is going to come back and be significant at the end of the play. So keep it in mind. Westmoreland. This is one of my favorite lines. This is his uncle's teaching. This is Worcester. Malevolent to you in all aspects. Malevolent to you in the sense of stars being aligned for you or aligned against you, right? It's all the astrology idea. The king is the sun at the center of the universe that is the court, and he's surrounded by the peers of the realm who are the stars and the planets circling around him in orderly fashion, but yielding their influence. And in the case of Worcester, says Westmoreland, it's a malevolent influence. But look at how the line is built. This is his uncle's teaching. This is Worcester. So Shakespeare is building on our expectation of an iambic pentameter line. Pa-pum, 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 pa-pum. If I read it that way, it would read, this is his uncle's teaching. This is Worcester. Extra unstressed syllable at the end. That's okay. That's always okay. But he doesn't do that. He makes the first foot what we call a trochee, meaning an inverted iamb. Bumpa. What does that do when you start a line with a trochee instead of an iamb? Instead of pa-pum, pa-pum, you have bum-pa-pa-pum. It puts a lot of stress on the fourth syllable. This is his unk. And then what does he do? Then he puts the word this in another position of stress. This is his uncle's teaching. This is Worcester. So all the weight of this line, this, Worcester, with that unk in the. So what's the point of that? The point is to throw all this weight of negativity on Worcester, blaming Worcester for the misleading and misteaching of Hotspur. This is his uncle's teaching. This is Worcester malevolent to you in all aspects, which makes him prune himself and bristle up the crest of youth against your dignity. He's egging Hotspur on to be against the king. King, but I have sent for him to answer this, and for this cause a while we must neglect our holy purpose to Jerusalem. Cousin on Wednesday next, so we're going to meet. Okay. End of scene. Change to the low-life room in a, it's not actually, we're not in the tavern yet. We're in the Prince of Wales' private rooms. And he's got he's got Falstaff there with him and a bunch of others. Falstaff says, now, Hal, what time of day? Falstaff. Falstaff. Right? You try to rest yourself on that staff like this, and it falls. You can't trust it. Now, Hal, what time of day is it, lad? This is in prose. Hal, Prince Hal, responds, thou art so fat-witted with drinking of old sack and unbuttoning thee after supper and sleeping upon benches afternoon, that thou hast forgotten to demand that truly which thou wouldst truly know. What a devil hast thou to do with the time of the day? Unless hours were cups of sack, and minutes capons, and clocks the tongues of bawds, and dials the signs of leaping houses, he means brothels, and the blessed sun himself a fair hot wench in flame-colored taffeta, I see no reason why thou shouldst be so superfluous to demand the time of the day. All right, what's Prince Hal doing here? All of those people who are going to tell you that Prince Hal is wayward and immoral in his youth and then converts later, they're going by the history, but they're not going by Shakespeare. What is Hal doing in this speech? He's teasing Falstaff. He's poking at him for his immorality, for his self-indulgence. Falstaff, indeed you come near me now, Hal, for we that take purses, okay, he's confessing to being a thief, go by the moon and the 7 stars, not by Phoebus, that's Apollo, the god of the sun, he that wandering knight so fair. Falstaff is full of tag ends of older plays and cliches and student sentences that had to be memorized when you were a student, and so on. And a lot of these are references that the audience would be familiar with. And I prithee, sweet wag, when thou art king, as God save thy grace, majesty, I should say, for grace thou wilt have none. He's insulting him. Your grace is what you call a prince. He should say your majesty when you're king. What, none? No, by my troth, not so much as will serve to be prologue to an egg and butter. That is, you say grace before a meal. Egg and butter is a very small meal, but you say a short blessing, but you won't even have that much grace. He's lying about him. No, by my troth, not. Well, how then? Come, roundly, roundly. Get to it. Marry then, sweet wag. Wag means kind of joker and scamp. When thou art king, let not us that are squires of the night's body be called thieves of the day's beauty. Let us be Diana's foresters, gentlemen of the shade, minions of the moon. Diana is the goddess of the moon and the hunt. And let men say we be men of good government, being governed as the sea is by our noble and chaste mistress, the moon, under whose countenance we steal. So he comes out at night to rob people of their money. And he wants to be treated as a noble, engaging in a noble profession, serving the goddess Diana, the moon. So the prince is as clever as he is and says, thou sayest well, and it holds well too. For the fortune of us that are the moon's men doth ebb and flow like the sea, being governed as the sea is by the moon. As for proof now, a purse of gold most resolutely snatched on Monday night and most dissolutely spent on Tuesday morning, got with swearing lay by. That's what they said we would say stick 'em up. They would say, well, I don't even know. You guys know what stick 'em up means, but do the kids know what stick 'em up means?
Your money or your life.
Your money or your life. Got with swearing lay by, and spent with crying bring in, that is, bring into the room of the tavern, whatever we're ordering, using the stolen money to buy it with. Now in as low an ebb as the foot of the ladder, says the prince, and by in as high a flow, so ebb and flow, he's talking about the sea tides, and by in as high a flow as the ridge of the gallows. So he's saying, yeah, you're right, minions of the moon. You're like the sea. You're down here today getting all this money and spending it, and pretty soon you're going to be hanged, because that was the punishment for a thief. Falstaff, by the Lord thou sayest true, lad, and is not my hostess of the tavern a most sweet wench? Isn't she kind of delectable, Mistress Quickly of the tavern? Prince, as the honey of Hybla, my old lad of the castle. The original name of Falstaff in the early version supposedly was Oldcastle. And the family of Oldcastle was angry that Shakespeare was making fun of one of their ancestors who was noble. And so he changed it. That's the story. And then he says, and is not a buff jerkin a most sweet robe of durance? A buff jerkin is worn by the sheriff in arresting thieves. Falstaff, how now, mad wag? What in thy quips and thy quiddities? What a plague have I to do with a buff jerkin? I don't want anything to do with the police. Prince, what a pox have I to do with my hostess of the tavern? I don't sleep around. Well, thou hast called her to a reckoning many a time and oft. You've had to call her in to pay her. Did I ever call for thee to pay thy part? No, says Falstaff, I'll give thee thy due, thou hast paid all there. Yea, and elsewhere, so far as my coin would stretch, and where it would not have used my credit. Yea, says Falstaff, and so used it, that were it not here apparent that thou art here apparent. But I prithee, sweet wag. So what's Prince Hal been doing? He's been paying for the entertainment of these thieves. Do we have any evidence yet that he is a thief? No. Do we have any evidence that he's a whoremaster? No. Any evidence that he is immoral in any way? No. He's poking fun at the immorality of Falstaff. But he is hanging out with him. But I prithee, sweet wag, says Falstaff, shall there be gallows standing in England when thou art king, and resolution thus fubbed as it is with the rusty curb of old Father Antic, the law? Do not thou, when thou art king, hang a thief. No, says the prince, thou shalt. Shall I? Oh, rare, by the Lord, I'll be a brave judge. Prince, thou judgest false already. I mean, thou shalt have the hanging of the thieves, and so become a rare hangman. Okay, hang a thief. Do not thou, when thou art king, hang a thief. Hang a thief can mean 4 things, and they're playing on all 4. Don't make laws that cause thieves to be hanged. That's what Falstaff means. Prince says, no, thou shalt hang a thief. Hang as a thief. Falstaff, shall I, O rare, by the Lord, I'll be a brave judge. A judge has the hanging of thieves. And the prince says, thou judgest false already. I mean, thou shalt have the hanging of thieves and so become a rare hangman. I'm going to make you the guy who hangs the thieves physically, literally. Falstaff says, well, how well, and in some sort it jumps, it fits with my humor as well as waiting in the court, I can tell you. There's going to be a joke coming. For obtaining of suits, yea, for obtaining of suits, whereof the hangman hath no lean wardrobe. Okay, so the joke is based on you hang out at court to get a suit, like you sue in a court of law, right? We're going to a lawsuit. So you're at court suing to achieve something or be given something. Remember Buckingham suing to be given the lands that he was promised by Richard III. That's a suit at court. But the hangmen got the clothing of the people they hanged. That was part of their perk. That was their tip. They got to keep the clothing, and what they would do is if it fit, they'd wear it, and if it didn't, they'd sell it. So then Falstaff changes tones. Blood, I'm as melancholy as a gibcat or a lugbear, an old lion or a lover's lute, yea, or the drone of a Lincolnshire bagpipe. What sayst thou to a hare, or the melancholy of Moorditch? That's the sewage, open sewer of London. Thou hast the most unsavory similes, and art indeed the most comparative, rascaliest, sweet young prince. But Hal, I prithee, trouble me no more with vanity. Don't keep harping on my vanity. I would to God thou and I knew where a commodity of good names were to be bought. Not earned, bought. An old lord of the council rated me the other day in the street about you, sir, but I marked him not. And yet he talked very wisely, but I regarded him not. And yet he talked wisely, and in the street too. And the prince says, thou didst well, for wisdom cries out in the streets, and no man regards it. And if you know your book of Proverbs pretty well, you know that comes straight from the book of Proverbs. So the prince is still needling him. Oh, thou hast damnable iteration, and art indeed able to corrupt a saint. Thou hast done much harm upon me, Hal. God forgive thee for it. Before I knew thee, Hal, I knew nothing. And now am I, if a man should speak truly, little better than one of the wicked. I must give over this life, give it up. And I will give it over. By the Lord, and I do not, I am a villain. I'll be damned for never a king's son in Christendom. I'm going to reform. I'm going to give it up. You have ruined me. I'm giving up the life of a thief and a vanity. And the prince says, where shall we take a purse tomorrow, Jack? Meaning steal a purse. Falstaff, zounds, where thou wilt, I'll make one. Lad, I'll make one. And I do not, call me villain and baffle me. Okay, if I don't reform, call me a villain. Where should we go take a purse tomorrow? Oh, I'll make one of the group. I'll go with you. If I don't, call me a villain. So the prince says, I see a good amendment of life in thee, from praying to purse taking. Now, can Falstaff ever be caught without an answer? Never. He's as witty as they come. Why, Hal? 'Tis my vocation. By my vocation, Hal, 'tis no sin for a man to labor in his vocation. What does vocation mean? Voco, vocare, from Latin. Calling. Who calls? God. Does God call anyone to be a thief? Thou shalt not steal. So, but he's defining this as his vocation, and it's no sin to labor in your vocation. Enter Poins. Poins. Now, shall we know if Gadshill have set a match? All right, to avoid confusion, there are two uses of the word Gadshill in this play. One is a place. It's a hill where the wagons going up the hill the guys have to get out of the wagon and help the horses push it up the hill, especially in muddy weather. And then they put on the brake, which is a kind of beam that attaches to the wheels, before they go down the hill, so the wagon, if it's heavy, doesn't run over the horses. So everybody has to stop there, and it's a perfect place to rob the coach. And so its name is Gadshill. And then there's a character whose nickname is Gadshill, because he's a thief and he has robbed there many times. So this first use of it is the person. Now we shall know if Gadshill have set a match. Oh, if men were to be saved by merit, that is not by the sacrifice of Christ, but by merit, what hole in hell were hot enough for him? In other words, no merit in Gadshill, or Poins rather. Notice the H's, the alliteration on the H's. What hole in hell were hot enough for him? Later, we're going to hear Hotspur use those H's in a different context. This is the most omnipotent villain that ever cried, stand to a true man. Stand, stick 'em up, lay by. Good morrow, Ned. Ned Poins. Good morrow, sweet Hal. What says Monsieur Remorse? That's Falstaff. What says Sir John Sack and Sugar? A favorite drink of Falstaff's. Sack is a kind of sherry wine. Jack, how agrees the devil and thee about thy soul, that thou soldst him on Good Friday last for a cup of Madeira and a cold capon's leg? Why Good Friday last? What are you supposed to do on Friday? At least not eat meat, right? So he ate a cold capon's leg on a Friday. And so how are you going to agree with the devil about your soul? Prince, Sir John stands to his word, the devil shall have his bargain. He's going to have his soul, for he was never yet a breaker of proverbs. He will give the devil his due. Then thou art damned for keeping thy word with the devil. Prince, else he had been damned for cozening the devil, tricking the devil. Then Point says, on Gad's Hill, that's the place, there are pilgrims going to Canterbury with rich offerings and traders riding to London with fat purses. I have vizards for you all, that's masks. You have horses for yourself. Gadshill, that's the man, lies in Rochester. I've ordered supper tomorrow night in Eastcheap. We may do it as secure as sleep. I'm going to stuff your purses full of crowns. And if you will not, tarry at home and be hanged. Now that's one of the favorite phrases in this play of negation. Do it or be hanged, or do it and be hanged. The hell with you. It just means, damn you, the hell with you. Falstaff, hear ye, Yedward. That's Poins. If I tarry at home and go not, I'll hang you for going. Poins looks at him, and in some productions pulls out a little dagger and says, you will, Chops? And he changes the subject quickly. How? Wilt thou make one, meaning join us and be one of the thieves? Who? I rob? I a thief? Not I, by my faith. There's neither honesty, manhood, nor good fellowship in thee, nor thou camest not of the blood royal, if thou darest not stand for 10 shillings. This is a very reverberating joke. There's no royal blood in you if you're not willing to steal for as little as 10 shillings. What's the implication? What has his father done? stolen the throne. Not really stolen it, saved the country by stealing it, but he's making a joke about it. Prince says, well then, once in my days I'll be a madcap, changing the way Falstaff did. Why, that's well said. And then he says, well, come what will, I'll tarry at home. I'm not going to go. So he's playing with Falstaff in the same way that Falstaff was changeable before. Falstaff, by the Lord, I'll be a traitor then when thou art king. Prince, I care not. Sir John, I prithee, leave the prince and me alone. I will lay him down such reasons for this adventure that he shall go. Well, says Falstaff, God give thee the spirit of persuasion, and him the ears of profiting, that what thou speakest may move, and what he hears may be believed, that the true prince may, for recreation's sake, prove a false thief. For the poor abuses of the time want, meaning lack, countenance, meaning support from the face of the higher-ups. So what's that language? What's all that balanced language about? It's imitation, and we're going to have another greater example of it later, of the euphuistic style of John Lilly, who was a playwright of the previous generation, who wrote in these great long balanced sentences with metaphors and similes, and we'll hear it when Falstaff gets on the stage later. Farewell, thou latter spring, farewell, all hallowed summer. The late summer. He's old. He's behaving like youth. He's behaving as if it's springtime for him. But really, he's an old man. And it's inappropriate. So Poins says, look, I've got this joke going. We're going to pretend to go, but we're going to let them steal the money, and then we're going to steal it from them. And the cream of the joke, the fun, is going to be line 179. The virtue of this jest will be the incomprehensible lies that this same fat rogue will tell us when we meet at supper. How 30 at least he fought with, what wards, that is, positions of defense, what blows, what extremities he endured. In the reproof of this lives the jest. We're going to catch him out in his lies. That's going to be the fun. Okay. They all go out, and the prince has this soliloquy. Now, last Tuesday, I made the point standing about at the end of the class, which I'm going to make now more vehemently. In Shakespeare, there's no subtext. There's only text. In modern drama, the guy comes in and the girl on the couch says, where were you? And he says, why do you want to know? And that's all you get from the playwright and the soap opera writer. And so she has to say, where were you? Or where were you? And he says, why do you want to know? Or why do you want to know? Or why do you want to know? Why do you want to know? Why do you want to know? That's not Shakespeare. Shakespeare's art is telling us what he wants us to know in the words. So when somebody has a soliloquy, he's telling us what he really thinks. Iago's soliloquies tell us that he is a villain and all the plots he's making. We're not in the dark about that. People in the play may be in the dark because he's lying to them, but we know he's lying because he tells us the truth. So now that's the background for how to understand this. The other thing to note here is Shakespeare's use of what we call variation. C.S. Lewis wrote a wonderful essay on this idea of variation. One of the reasons that makes Shakespeare's poetry so great is that he tells us the same thing 10, 12, 15 times, 14 in this speech, with different metaphors for two reasons. One is that when we speak, we almost never come up with the perfect way of saying something the first time. We stab at it, and we stab at it again, and we try again. We use this metaphor, we use another till finally the person we're talking to gets what we're talking about, or we find the best way of saying it. So when Shakespeare does this, it makes it very realistic. People are actually talking, thinking. The other is that it allows Shakespeare to harvest metaphors from the whole of creation in multiplicities of images to get to the same point. So that if we miss one or two or five, we get the other one, or a sixth one or a seventh. And that way we get these depths of poetry and at the same time convincing realism. We believe the character is a person talking, and we get to these great depths of the meaning of what the person's saying. So you can count for yourselves how many times Prince Hal says the same thing, even though there's this smooth poetic movement through the ideas. So the prince says to us, I know you all, and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness. Yet herein will I imitate the sun, who doth permit the base contagious clouds to smother up his beauty from the world, that when he please again to be himself, being wanted, he may be more wondered at by breaking through the foul and ugly mists of vapors that did seem to strangle him. If all the year were playing holidays, to sport would be as tedious as to work. But when they seldom come, they wished for come. And nothing pleaseth but rare accidents. So when this loose behavior I throw off, and pay the debt I never promised, by how much better than my word I am, by so much shall I falsify men's hopes, and, like bright metal on a sullen ground, my reformation, glittering o'er my fault, shall show more goodly, and attract more eyes than that which hath no foil to set it off. I'll so offend to make offense a skill, redeeming time when men think least I will. Well, some critics have tried to make this not really true. He's just kind of justifying himself, reading subtext here. Some have tried to say, oh, you see what a calculating political no-goodnik he is? He's a faker and a... Well, what's the point? Why is the prince allowing his reputation to be that of a thief and a lowlife of the stews of London? Because he needs people to be amazed when he becomes the king and shows himself not to be that at all. He needs, in other words, to win over the people at all levels, the court and the low levels, the commoners. And he has to do it because of how his father came to the throne. Because how his father came to the throne. Because his father's faced with nothing but rebels using this or that excuse. And he needs to unify England, and he knows it. So he's playing on purpose at being a loose liver and vain and self-indulgent and so on. We never see him doing anything immoral. Whatever money they steal, these thieves, friends of his, he pays back later. We'll see that. But he's doing it to save England. Yes?
You said historically he was seen as actually being
dissolute in youth and growing into his
Why
office.
did Shakespeare decide to make him just playing that?
Because he is making of this young man his ideal king. And he doesn't change his spots. When he reveals himself at the end of Henry IV, Part 2, everybody's amazed. In other words, what he's predicting here is going to happen is exactly what happens. And then he's able to unify everybody and take them off to conquer France. And in that play, in Henry V, he's got a Welshman, he's got a Scotsman, he's got an Irishman, he's got an Englishman. They're all together fighting for him. Nobody's rebelling. There are a couple of rebels in the beginning of that play. He executes them, and that's the end of them. But the point is that his immorality is a ruse, but it's done at the sacrifice of his own reputation to heal England. So where does honor lie? Okay. Into the king's presence come Northumberland, Worcester, and Hotspur. Now remember who these guys are. Northumberland helped him to the throne. Worcester helped him to the throne. Northumberland's son is Hotspur. He won that battle in Scotland. And his uncle Northumberland's brother, is Worcester giving him bad advice and being malevolent to the throne. So the king, sounding like a king, says, "My blood hath been too cold and temperate, unapt to stir at these indignities, and you have found me, for accordingly you tread upon my patience. But be sure I will from henceforth rather be myself mighty and to be feared, than my condition, which hath been smooth as oil, soft as young down, and therefore lost that title of respect, which the proud soul ne'er pays but to the proud. Worcester, our house, my sovereign liege, little deserves the scourge of greatness to be used on it, and that same greatness too, which our own hands have hoped to make so portly." Notice what he's reminding him of. We helped to make you king. Now, do you remember I said once Bolingbroke, Henry IV later, says to Richard, "Look, you've got to do what I say and then I'll obey you." It's over for Richard. And the same is starting to be true here. If Worcester can say, "Look, we helped to make you king, so you need to do this for me," he's not king anymore. The king gets mad. "Worcester, get thee gone, for I do see danger and disobedience in thine eye. Oh, sir, your presence is too bold and peremptory, and majesty might never yet endure the moody frontier of a servant brow. You have good leave to leave us. When we need your use and counsel, we shall send for you." Not off with your head, just get out.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
When Northumberland says, "My lord," who is he addressing?
The king. The king interrupts him. The dash is an interruption.
So he's not,
He starts to go and reinforce what Worcester's saying
okay.
and make it a little
He's
nice.
not telling Worcester, "Hey, cool."
No, it's his brother. No, he's talking to the king, and the king interrupts and won't listen. And then he says, "You were about to speak," to Northumberland. And so Northumberland does speak. "Yea, my good lord, those prisoners in your highness' name demanded, which Harry Percy here at Holmdon took, whereas he says, not with such strength denied as is delivered to your majesty. Either envy, therefore, or misprision is guilty of this fault, and not my son. He didn't keep the prisoners from you. Somebody's telling tales about him. No fair." Then Hotspur, without waiting to be asked, has a long speech to justify himself. And this tells us everything about Hotspur. "My liege, I did deny no prisoners. But I remember when the fight was done, when I was dry with rage and extreme toil, breathless and faint, leaning upon my sword, came there a certain lord, neat and trimly dressed, fresh as a bridegroom, and his chin new reaped showed like a stubble land at harvest home. He was perfumed like a milliner, and twixt his finger and his thumb he held a pouncet box, which ever and anon he gave his nose, and took it away again, who therewith angry, when it next came there, took it in snuff." That is, he's taking snuff. And the pouncet box is sent to prevent himself from having to smell the rot on the battlefield. "Who therewith angry, when it next came there, took it in snuff. And still he smiled and talked," still means always. "Still he smiled and talked, and as the soldiers bore dead bodies by, he called them untaught knaves, unmannerly, to bring a slovenly, unhandsome corpse betwixt the wind and his nobility. With many holiday and lady terms he questioned me, amongst the rest demanded my prisoners in your majesty's behalf. I then, all smarting with my wounds being cold, to be so pestered with a popinjay, out of my grief and my impatience, answered neglectingly, I know not what he should or he should not. For he made me mad to see him shine so brisk, and smell so sweet, and talk so like a waiting gentlewoman of guns and drums and wounds, God save the mark, and telling me the sovereignest thing on earth was parmacetti for an inward bruise, and that it was great pity so it was this villainous saltpeter should be digged out of the bowels of the harmless earth, which many a good tall fellow had destroyed so cowardly. And but for these vile guns, he would himself have been a soldier. This bald, unjointed chat of his, my lord, I answered indirectly, as I said, and I beseech you, let not his report come current for an accusation betwixt my love and your high majesty. All right, this sounds pretty convincing, right? A popinjay comes to him and, I don't want to smell the corpses. And Hotspur's a fighter, he just won this battle. There's one problem, though. He's coming from the king. He's demanding the prisoners for the king. And Hotspur answers him neglectingly. Even if all this were true about him, all it means is that he was come from the court directly, hadn't been fighting. Hotspur turns him into a ladylike popinjay. But Blunt is trying to ease the conflict. He says, the circumstance considered good, my lord, whate'er Lord Percy then had said to such a person and in such a place at such a time, with all the rest retold, may reasonably die and never rise to do him wrong, nor any way impeach what then he said, so he unsay it now. So long as he unsays it now and gives you the prisoner. King, why, yet he doth deny his prisoners, but with proviso, an exception, that we at our own charge shall ransom straight his brother-in-law, the foolish Mortimer. All right, brother-in-law. So if you go to this, Mortimer's sister, Anne Mortimer, how does this go? I'm not going to work this out from this. Anyway, Hotspur is married to the Mortimer family. Mortimer and Hotspur are brothers-in-law. And he wants to ransom him home.
Excuse me, he wants to ransom Mortimer because...
Hotspur wants the king to ransom Mortimer from Glendower. Glendower's the Welshman. Mortimer lost that battle. So the two brother-in-laws were in the north and in the south. Mortimer lost, and Hotspur won. And he's keeping his prisoners. And he's holding them until the king goes and pays Glendower to release Mortimer.
So that's why he was withholding them,
That's right.
not as a mere affront to the king's authority. 'Cause
No.
I didn't get all that.
No, it wasn't a mere affront. It is an affront, but it's for a purpose.
Who was Hotspur speaking of that was talking to him and had all the sweet smelling?
Yeah, we don't know his name.
don't know
It's just somebody came from the king and said, give me your prisoners. And he said, I don't know how I answered him. Why, yet he doth deny his prisoners, but with proviso and exception, that we at our own charge shall ransom straight his brother-in-law, the foolish Mortimer, who on my soul hath willfully betrayed the lives of those that he did lead to fight against that great magician, damned Glendower, whose daughter, as we hear, that Earl of March, that's Mortimer, hath lately married. In other words, he wasn't defeated. He went over to the other side and married the daughter of the enemy. Shall our coffers then be emptied to redeem a traitor home? Shall we buy treason and indent with fears when they have lost and forfeited themselves? No, on the barren mountain let him starve. For I shall never hold that man my friend, whose tongue shall ask me for 1 penny cost to ransom home revolted Mortimer. Hotspur's losing his temper. Revolted Mortimer? He never did fall off, my sovereign liege, but by the chance of war. To prove that true needs no more but 1 tongue for all those wounds, those mouthed wounds, which valiantly he took when on the gentle Severn sedgy bank, in single opposition hand to hand, he did confound the best part of an hour in changing hardiment with great Glendower. 3 times they breathed. He goes through this whole description of the battle. The king says, thou dost belie him, Percy, line 113. Percy, thou dost belie him. He never did encounter with Glendower. I tell thee, he durst as well have met the devil alone as Owen Glendower for an enemy. Art thou not ashamed? But sirrah, henceforth let me not hear you speak of Mortimer. Send me your prisoners with the speediest means, or you shall hear in such a kind from me as will displease you. My lord Northumberland will license your departure with your son. Send us your prisoners, or you will hear of it.
He calls him Sarah, isn't that sort of
Very condescending.
cut down? Yeah.
Yes. Where does he? But Sarah, yeah, it's demeaning, but he's being royal. Yes.
Hotspur has no way to actually know what happened, right? Like he said,
Well,
he knew that they fought, but
yeah, I mean, he may have had messenger, when, in this period, of course, and at all times, even right this minute, with all the news media we have, different stories come out and people report different things, and some of them are true and some of them aren't true, and they're equally believable. So, he's probably building on something he heard. Hotspur, the king goes out with Blunt and the others, and Hotspur says, "And if the devil come and roar for them, I will not send them. I will after straight and tell him so, for I will ease my heart, albeit I make a hazard of my head." Northumberland, his father. What? Drunk with choler? There's your clue. Stay and pause a while. Here comes your uncle. Enter Worcester. "Speak of Mortimer. Zounds, I will speak of him, and let my soul want mercy if I do not join with him. Yea, on his part I'll empty all these veins and shed my dear blood drop by drop in the dust, but I will lift the downtrod Mortimer as high in the air as this unthankful king, as this ingrate and cankered Bolingbroke. Brother, the king hath made your nephew mad. Who struck this heat up after I was gone? He will forsooth have all my prisoners. And when I urged the ransom once again of my wife's brother, then his cheek looked pale, and on my face he turned an eye of death, trembling even at the name of Mortimer." I don't think it was pale in fear. It was probably pale in anger. "I cannot blame him," says Worcester. Was not he proclaimed by Richard that dead is the next of blood? That is the heir to the throne? He was. I heard the proclamation. And then it was when the unhappy king, whose wrongs in us God pardoned, did set forth upon his Irish expedition. Now he's feeling sorry about Richard, that horrible king that we saw. And he's sorry that they helped to make Bolingbroke king. "And for whose death we in the world's wide mouth live scandalized and foully spoken of," says Worcester. "But soft, I pray you, did King Richard then proclaim my brother Edmund Mortimer heir to the crown?" "He did, myself did hear it." "Nay, then I cannot blame his cousin king that wished him on the barren mountains starve. But shall it be that you, that set the crown upon the head of this forgetful man, and for his sake wear the detested blot of murderous subornation, shall it be that you a world of curses undergo, being the agents or base second means, the cords, the ladder, or the hangman rather?" And then he goes on, "To pull down Richard, that sweet lovely rose, and plant this thorn, this canker Bolingbroke. Shall it further be spoken, that you are fooled, discarded, and shook off? Therefore I say," and Worcester interrupts him, "Pray, cousin, say no more. And now I will enclasp a secret book, and to your quick conceiving discontents I'll read you matter deep and dangerous, as full of peril and adventurous spirit as to our walk a current, roaring loud on the unsteadfast footing of a spear," crossing a river on a little spear. Hotspur doesn't listen. All he says is, "If he fall in, good night, or sink or swim. Send danger from the east unto the west. So honor cross it from the north to south, and let them grapple. Oh, the blood more stirs to rouse a lion than to start a hare. Fine, let it be dangerous. That's good, that's what I want." Northumberland, imagination of some great exploit drives him beyond the bounds of patience. "By heaven, methinks it were an easy leap to pluck bright honor from the pale-faced moon, or dive into the bottom of the deep, where fathom line could never touch the ground, and pluck up drowned honor by the locks. So he that doth redeem her thence might wear without co-rival all her dignities. But out upon this half-faced fellowship." What's Hotspur's idea of honor? Having no fellow, winning battles, conquering danger, becoming famous, no matter what, and having honor without co-rival. He apprehends a world of figures here, but not the form of what he should attend. "Good cousin, give me audience for a while. Listen to me. I cry you mercy." He apologizes for going on like that. And Worcester says, "Those same noble Scots that are your prisoners, I'll keep them all. By God, he shall not have a Scot of them. No, if a Scot would save his soul, he shall not. I'll keep them by this hand." You start away and lend no ear to unto my purposes. Those prisoners you shall keep. Nay, I will, that's flat. He said he would not ransom Mortimer, forbade my tongue to speak of Mortimer. But I will find him when he lies asleep, and in his ear I'll hollow, Mortimer! Nay, I'll have a starling, shall be taught to speak nothing but Mortimer, and give it him to keep his anger still in motion. Hear you, cousin, a word. All studies here I solemnly defy, save how to gall and pinch this Bolingbroke, and that same sword and buckler, Prince of Wales. But that I think his father loves him not, and would be glad he met with some mischance, I would have him poisoned with a pot of ale. Farewell, kinsman, I will talk to you when you are better tempered to attend. Northumberland, why, what a wasp-stung and impatient fool art thou to break into this woman's mood, tying thine ear to no tongue but thine own. Why, look you, I'm whipped and scourged with rods, nettled and stung with pismires when I hear of this vile politician, that's a bad word in Shakespeare, Bolingbroke. In Richard's time, what do you call the place? A plague upon it is in Gloucestershire. 'Twas where the madcap duke his uncle kept, his uncle York. Where I first bowed my knee unto this king of smiles, this Bolingbroke. Splud! When you and he came back from Ravensburg. At Berkeley Castle. You say true. Yeah. Why? What a candy deal of... He couldn't remember the name. And he's driving himself crazy. Later he's going to tell us he goes to buffets with himself. Why, what a candy deal of courtesy this fawning greyhound then did proffer me. Look, when his infant fortune came to age, and gentle Harry Percy, and kind cousin, oh, the devil take such cozeners. God forgive me. Good uncle, tell your tale, for I have done. Worcester, nay, if you have not to it again, we will stay your leisure. I have done in faith. All right, so what does he tell them to do? Go back to your prisoners, release them, and we're putting together a plot. And it's going to join several different groups of people. Glendower, Mortimer, and the Douglas. The Douglas is the Scots enemy in the north. Glendower is the Welsh enemy in the south. And we're going to join together and raise an army and overthrow this king. And the minute he says that, it ends. And we get one of those little side scenes of an inn in London where carriers, meaning teamsters or truckers, frequent. And they talk in a kind of language that is very familiar to the commoners of London, but probably not to us. But I'm not going to go through all the details unless you ask me specific questions. Beat cuts cattle, put a few flocks in the point. Poor jade is wrung and the withers out of all cess. The horse is raw, rubbed raw. Peas and beans are dank here. People pee in the chimney. I'm stung like a tench because of fleas, because they don't give us a Jordan, which means a chamber pot. Oh yes, not trying to, succeeding. Now, what's the key to this whole passage? He says, this house, line 10, this house is turned upside down since Robin Ostler died. Robin Ostler. Ostler is the name of a person who takes care of the horses in an inn. So the great old ostler, who ran everything well, died, and now the place is a mess. And it's frequented not only by carriers, but by thieves. So Gadshill comes in. We know about him. He's one of the thieves. Good morrow, carriers. What's o'clock? I think it'd be 2 o'clock. I prithee, lend me thy lantern to see my gelding in the stable. Fat chance, says the carrier. I know what you are. Nay, by God soft, I know a trick worth 2 of that, in faith. Lend me thine. When? Can tell, meaning no way, not in your life. I'll see thee hanged first. And then Gadshill talks to the chamberlain. The chamberlain's the inside man. And he tells him that there are people going to London with a lot of money. But Gadshill says, we're not in danger of hanging for being thieves. Why? Line 68. If I hang, what talkest thou to me of the hangman? If I hang, I'll make a fat pair of gallows. For if I hang, old Sir John hangs with me, and thou knowest he is no starveling. Ta, tisk. There are other Trojans that thou dreamst not of, the which for sport's sake are content to do the profession some grace, that would, if matters should be looked into for their own credit's sake, make all whole. That is, we got the prince on our side. We can walk invisible. We're fine. And they're preying on the Commonwealth, which is parallel to the rebels preying on the Commonwealth. Thieves are also rebels. All right, Act 2, Scene 2. Come, shelter, shelter, I have removed Falstaff's horse, and he frets like gummed velvet. Now, this is the funniest line in all of Shakespeare. Stand close, the prince says, and Falstaff comes in. I'm not going to take too much time, but I feel like I have to explain why. Falstaff comes in and says, Poins! Poins and be hanged! Poins! Why is it funny? He's calling out the name Poins, and he's saying this rote phrase, and be hanged. Like, get out and be hanged, or take it and be hanged, or whatever. Do something and be hanged, meaning the hell with you. Okay, take it and the hell with you. Take it and be hanged. Falstaff is so used to saying this that he doesn't even say a verb here. He just says the name, and it just comes out as this kind of autopilot thing. Poins! Poins and be hanged, like under his breath. Poins! All right, stop shouting. Your horse, we took your horse and it's over there. It's hard for me to walk because I'm so fat. If I escape killing the rogue, I hope to die a fair death. I have forsworn, that's Poins, I have forsworn his company hourly any time this 22 years, and yet I am bewitched with the rogue's company. If the rascal have not given me medicines to make me love him, I'll be hanged. It's just what Bramantio accused Othello of doing to Desdemona, giving her magic potions to make her love him. I'll starve ere I rob a foot further. 21. And 'twere not as good a deed as drink to turn true man and leave these rogues. I am the veriest varlet that ever chewed with a tooth. As good a deed as drink to turn true man, that is to be converted from a false man to a true man and turn against these rogues. 8 yards of uneven ground is 70 miles afoot with me, and the stony-hearted villains know it well enough. He's so fat, it's hard for him to walk. That's why he wants his horse. A plague upon it when thieves cannot be true to one another. He whistles. Give me my horse. Peace, ye fat guts. Lie down, lay thy ear close to the ground, and list if thou canst hear the tread of travelers. Falstaff, have you any levers to lift me up again, being down? Sblood, I'll not bear mine own flesh so far afoot again for all the coin in thy father's exchequer. What a plague mean ye to colt me thus? Thou liest. Thou art not colted, thou art uncolted. I prithee, good Prince Hal, help me to my horse, good king's son. Out, ye rogue, shall I be your ostler? That same word again, echo. Go hang thyself in thine own heir apparent garters. If I be ta'en, meaning arrested, I'll peach for this. That is, I'll implicate all of you. And I have not ballads made on you all and sung to filthy tunes, let a cup of sack be my poison. When a jest is so forward and a foot too, I hate it. All right. So hide yourselves, here they come. How many be there of them, says Peto, Gadshill, some 8 or 10. Falstaff, line 62. Zounds, will they not rob us? What, a coward, Sir John Paunch? Indeed, I am not John of Gaunt, your grandfather, but yet no coward, Hal. Well, we leave that to the proof. Tells him where his horse is. So what happens? They step aside, Poins and the prince, and Falstaff and the others rob these men of all their money. And he comes in shouting, On, Bacon's on, what ye knaves, young men must live, you are grand jurors, are ye, will jury thee in faith. He says, Strike down with them, cut the villains' throats, that is trying to scare them. Ah, horse and caterpillars, bacon-fed knaves, they hate us youth. This is Falstaff shouting. He's older than me, probably, in his mid-70s or almost 80. They hate us youth, so that's pretty funny. All right. They rob them and bind them, they go out. Enter the prince and poins in buckram suits. The thieves have bound the true men, now could thou and I rob the thieves and go merrily to London. It would be argument for a week, laughter for a month, and good jest forever. They're coming back in. Come, my masters, let us share. And the prince and poins, says Falstaff, line 95. And the prince and poins be not two errant cowards, there's no equity stirring. There's no more valor in that poins than in a wild duck. As they are sharing, says Shakespeare in one of his longest stage directions, the prince and poins set upon them. They all run away, and Falstaff, after a blow or two, runs away too, leaving the booty behind them. Got with much ease. And they go back to London, and Falstaff sweats to death and lards the earth, the lean earth, as he walks along. To lard something is to interfold fat into the lean before you cook it, right? It gives it flavor. So he's larding the lean earth as he walks along. Were it not for laughing, I should pity him. How the fat rogue roared. Okay. Can you keep going? Do you want a break? Got a lot to do. All right. Hotspur comes in reading a letter. Now, the context is he has sent a letter to somebody saying, do you want to join our conspiracy against the king? And this is the answer, and he's reading it out loud. But for mine own part, my lord, I could be well contented to be there in respect of the love I bear your house. He could be contented? Why is he not then? In respect of the love he bears our house, he shows in this he loves his own barn better than he loves our house. Let me see some more. The purpose you undertake is dangerous. Why, that's certain. 'Tis dangerous to take a cold, to sleep, to drink. But I tell you, my lord fool, out of this nettle, danger, we pluck this flower, safety. That's the excuse for overthrowing the king. We'll be safer when he's not the king anymore. The purpose you undertake is dangerous, the friends you have named uncertain, the time itself unsorted, and your whole plot too light for the counterpoise of so great an opposition. The king has much greater force against you. It's not a good idea. Say you so? Say you so? I say unto you again, you are a shallow, cowardly hind, and you lie. What a lack brain is this? By the Lord, our plot is as good a plot as ever was laid. Our friends true and constant, a good plot, good friends, and full of expectations. An excellent plot, very good friends. What's he doing? Trying to convince himself, exactly right. Now, all these words are parallel to what we've just seen. Plot, thieving, right? The guys stealing the money at Gad's Hill are like, in little, the rebels trying to steal England from the king. Why, what a frosty-spirited rogue is this? Why, my Lord of York commends the plot and the general course of the action. Zounds, and I were now at by this rascal, I could brain him with his lady's fan. Is there not my father, my uncle, and myself, Lord Mortimer, my Lord of York, and Owen Glendower? Is there not besides the Douglas? Have I not all their letters to meet me in arms by the 9th of the next month? And are they not some of them set forward already? What a pagan rascal is this, an infidel. Ha! You shall see now, in very sincerity of fear and cold heart, will he to the king and lay open all our proceedings. Oh, I could divide myself and go to buffets for moving such a dish of skim milk with so honorable an action. What's honorable about it in his mind? Defeating a king. You get honor by fighting. Is it honorable to rebel against the king? No. So he's defining honor as winning a fight against somebody greater than yourself. And I could divide myself and go to buffets. That's his whole nature. He's constantly fighting. Even with himself, and in the next speeches with his wife. Hang him, let him tell the king, we are prepared, I will set forward tonight. Enter his lady. He calls her Kate. I think her name is Elizabeth. I must leave you within these 2 hours. O good my lord, why are you thus alone? For what offense have I this fortnight been a banished woman from my Harry's bed? What is it that takes from thee thy stomach pleasure and thy golden sleep? And she describes how he's screaming in the middle of the night in his dreams of basilisks, of cannon, culver, and prisoners, ransom, and of soldiers slain, and all the currents of a heady fight. He's dreaming of battles. The spirit within thee hath been so at war, and thus hath so bestirred thee in thy sleep, line 56, that beads of sweat have stood upon thy brow like bubbles in a late disturbed stream. What portents are these? Some heavy business hath my lord in hand, and I must know it, else he loves me not. And he ignores her. What ho? Is Gilliam's, that's the same name as William, with the packet gone? He's going to have a horse, a roan, a crop ear, is it not? It is my lord. That roan shall be my throne. Esperance means hope, and it's the motto of the Percy family. What is it carries you away, she says. Why, my horse, my love, my horse. Out, you mad-headed ape. A weasel hath not such a deal of spleen, that's another word for choler, as you are tossed with. In faith, I'll know your business, Harry, that I will. I fear my brother Mortimer does stir about his title to be the king, and hath sent for you to line his enterprise. But if you go so far afoot, I shall be weary, love. That picks up the Falstaff idea of going by foot, not with the horse. In faith, I'll break thy little finger, Harry, and if thou wilt not tell me all things true, she grabs his little finger, bending it back. It's about all she can do to hurt him. He's this tough warrior. Away, you trifler, love, I love thee not. Do you not love me? Do you not indeed? Well, do not then, for since you love me not, I will not love myself. Come, wilt thou see me ride, he says, and when I'm a horseback, I will swear I love thee infinitely. But hark you, Kate, I must not have you henceforth question me whither I go, nor reason whereabout. Whither I must, and to conclude, this evening must I leave you, gentle Kate. I know you wise, but yet no farther wise than Harry Percy's wife. Constant you are, but yet a woman, and for secrecy no lady closer, for I well believe thou wilt not utter what thou dost not know. And so far will I trust thee, gentle Kate. So how? So far? Not an inch further. But hark you, Kate, whither I go, thither shalt you go too. Today will I set forth, tomorrow you. Will this content you, Kate? It must have forth. What's the relationship between Hotspur and his wife? They love each other, no question. But their relationship is a relationship of wrangling, argument, fighting. And he doesn't trust her. Not because she's untrustworthy, but because he doesn't trust anyone. He doesn't trust women. And he doesn't want the plot to be betrayed. All right, Act 2, Scene 4. I'm going to try to get through Act 2, Scene 4, and then we may pause there, if I can. All right, I'm not going to read this whole bit, but the first thing that happens is the prince comes in and describes how he's been with a bunch of drawers, that is, waiters, we would call them, in a bar, barmen. And I know them by their Christian names, and they tell me I'm great, and when I'm King of England, they're all going to be supportive. I've learned their language. And then he plays this joke on a guy named Francis, who's a drawer. And the whole joke is he's offering to give him £1,000 whenever he asks for it, but he has Poins in the other room saying, Francis, 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 come and serve the table. And Francis doesn't respond to the offer of £1,000. He just says, anon, anon. And he says to the prince, I'm going to give you £1,000. Anon, sir, and he has to go answer. So the point comes at the end when the prince says, now it looks like, a stupid Renaissance joke that we don't find funny. But Shakespeare has his reasons. The groundlings would have found it funny. That ever this fellow should have, so he says, yes, let me decide and I'll tell you. First of all, at line 60, he says, I will give thee for it 1,000 pounds. For the sugar you gave me, 'twas a pennyworth. If I would it had been 2, I will give thee for it 1,000 pounds. Ask me when thou wilt, and thou shalt have it. All he has to do is give him a piece of sugar. He's going to have 1,000 pounds. And what happens? Point says Francis, and Francis says, anon, to the king, to the prince. Pretty soon, in a minute. I'll be right with you. I want to give you 1,000 pounds for a little piece of sugar. I'll be right with you. Anon, Francis? No, Francis, but tomorrow, Francis, or Francis, or Thursday. But Francis, wilt thou rob this, your boss? No, who do you mean? Oh, forget it. So now he says to Poins, line 94. Francis goes out. That ever this fellow should have fewer words than a parrot, and yet the son of a woman. His industry is upstairs and downstairs, his eloquence the parcel of a reckoning. What a loser. Non-heroic, missing his opportunity. Then he says, on the opposite side, I am not yet, that is, neither am I of Percy's mind, the Hotspur of the north. He that kills me some 6 or 7 dozen of Scots at a breakfast, washes his hands and says to his wife, fie upon this quiet life, I want work. Oh, my sweet Harry, says she, how many hast thou killed today? Give my roan horse a drench, that same horse, the roan, says he, and answers, some 14 an hour after, a trifle, a trifle. I prithee, call in Falstaff. I'll play Percy, and that damned Brawn shall play Dame Mortimer his wife. Call in Falstaff. All right, what's the point? Here is Francis, this hopeless case, can't even, pay attention to the prince who's going to be the king of the realm because people are calling him, and his job is to go to where people call him. Nor is he of the mind of Percy Hotspur, who just wants to kill and fight and fight and kill and fight, all for reputation, glory, and honor. I'm not either of those. I'm not this low-life Eastcheap dweller, really. Neither am I ambitious for the kind of glory or honor or fame that Hotspur gets by fighting, and no matter who, whether it's right or wrong. All right, now we're going to have our joke with Falstaff. Welcome, Jack. Where hast thou been? Falstaff. A plague of all cowards, I say, and a vengeance too. Marry and amen. Give me a cup of sack, boy. Ere I lead this life long, I'll sow nether stalks, and mend them and foot them too. A plague of all cowards. Give me a cup of sack, rogue. Is there no virtue extant? He drinketh. Prince, didst thou never see Titan kiss a dish of butter? Titan is the sun. Pitiful-hearted Titan that melted at the sweet tale of the suns. If thou didst, thou behold that compound, that is melting fat. You rogue, to the boy. To the boy. You rogue, here's lime in this sack too. There is nothing it's doctored with lime to make it seem more alcoholic than it is. You rogue, here's lime in this sack too. There is nothing but roguery to be found in villainous man. Yet a coward is worse than a cup of sack with lime in it. A villainous coward. Go thy ways, old Jack. Now, who's he pointing to when he's saying coward, coward, coward? The prince. You can't directly call him a coward. It's fighting words. Go thy ways, old Jack, he says about himself. Die when thou wilt. If manhood, good manhood, be not forgot upon the face of the earth, then am I a shotten herring. A shotten herring is a male herring who's already spread its seed to the female and to the eggs. In other words, emptied. There lives not 3 good men unhanged in England, and one of them is fat and grows old, God help the while. A bad world, I say. I would I were a weaver. I could sing psalms or anything. The weavers were often Puritans or extreme Protestants, and they would sing psalms in weaving. A plague of all cowards, I say still. How now, Woolsack? What mutter you? A king's son? If I do not beat thee out of thy kingdom with a dagger of lath, that's one of those, the word slapstick? Slapstick is sticks. And slapstick comedy is they're using sticks instead of swords, right? So a dagger made of just of a thin piece of wood. If I do not beat thee out of thy kingdom with a dagger of lath and drive all thy subjects afore thee like a flock of wild geese, I'll never wear hair on my face more. You, Prince of Wales? Why, you hoarse and round man, what's the matter? Are not you a coward? Answer me to that. And points there? Points. Zounds, ye fat paunch, and ye call me coward? By the Lord, I'll stab thee. I call thee coward? I'll see thee damned ere I call thee coward. But I would give £1,000 I could run as fast as thou canst. Okay, he's avoiding the windy side of the temper of points. You are straight enough in the shoulders, you care not who sees your back. Call you that backing of your friends? A plague upon such backing. Give me them that will face me. Give me a cup of sack. I am a rogue if I drunk today. Oh, villain, thy lips are scarce wiped since thou drunkst last. All's one for that. Oh, never mind that. He drinketh. A plague of all cowards, still say I. What's the matter? Falstaff, what's the matter? There be 4 of us here have ta'en £1,000 this day morning. Where is it, Jack? Where is it? Where is it? Taken from us it is, 100 upon poor 4 of us. How many were there that took it? 2. The prince and points. What, 100, man? I am a rogue if I were not at half sword with a dozen of them 2 hours together. I have escaped by miracle. I am 8 times thrust through the doublet, 4 through the hose, my buckler cut through and through, my sword hacked like a handsaw, ecce signum, he shows them the hacked sword. I never dealt better since I was a man. All would not do. A plague of all cowards. Let them speak. If they speak more or less than truth, they are villains and the sons of darkness. How was it? Speak, sirs, how was it? Gadsel. We 4 set upon some dozen, 16 at least, my lord, and bound them. No, oh, sorry, Peter. No, they were not bound. You rogue, they were bound, every man of them, or I am a Jew else, an Hebrew Jew. As we were sharing, some 6 or 7 fresh men set upon us. Falstaff, and unbound the rest, and then come in the other. What? Fought you with them all? Says the prince to Falstaff. All? I know not what you call all, but if I fought not with 50 of them, I am a bunch of radish. If there were not 2 or 3 and 50 upon poor old Jack, then am I no 2-legged creature. Pray God you have not murdered some of them. Nay, that's past praying for. I have peppered 2 of them. 2, I am sure I have paid. 2 rogues in buckram suits. I tell thee what, Hal, if I tell thee a lie, spit in my face and call me hoarse. Thou knowest my old ward. Here I lay, and thus I bore my point. 4 rogues in buckram let drive at me. What, 4? Thou saidst but 2 even now. 4, Hal, I told thee 4. Aye, he said 4. These 4 came all affront and mainly thrust at me. I made me no more ado, but took all their 7 points in my target thus. Target is his shield. 7? Why, there were but 4 even now. In buckram? One of the funniest lines. Aye, 4 in buckram suits. 7 by these hilts, or I'm a villain else. Aside. Prithee, let him alone. We shall have more anon. Dost thou hear me, Hal? Aye, and mark thee too, Jack. Mark meaning count, as well as listen. Do so, for it is worth the listening to. These 9 in buckram that I told thee of, so 2 more already, their points being broken, down fell their hose, ha ha. So the points of their swords being broken, but points are the snaps or buttons that hold up the pants. And the points are broken, the pants fall down. So he's making a joke. Their points being broken down fell their hose, began to give me ground. So they've interrupted him, but he keeps going. so the points of their swords are broken by Falstaff, and so they began to give me ground, but I followed me close, came in, foot in hand, and with a thought, 7 of the 11 I paid. Oh, monstrous! 11 buckram men growed out of 2. Falstaff. But as the devil would have it, 3 misbegotten knaves in Kendal Green came at my back and let drive at me. For it was so dark, Hal, that thou couldst not see thy hand. These lies are like their father that begets them, gross as a mountain, open, palpable. Why, thou clay-brained guts, thou naughty-pated fool, thou hoarse and obscene greasy tallow-catch. What, art thou mad? Art thou mad? Is not the truth the truth? Why, how couldst thou know these men in Kendal Green, and when it was so dark, thou couldst not see thy hand? Come, tell us your reason. What sayest thou to this? Come, your reason, Jack, your reason. Is there any way out of this? What? Upon compulsion? Zounds, and I were at the Strapado or all the racks in the world, I would not tell you on compulsion. Those are 2 forms of torture. Give you a reason on compulsion. Now there's the pronunciation problem, because reason and raisin were pronounced much closer to each other than we pronounce them. Give you a raisin on compulsion. If raisins were as plentiful as blackberries, I would give no raisin upon compulsion. I'll be no longer guilty of this sin, this sanguine coward, this bed presser, this horseback breaker, this huge hill of flesh. Falstaff's going to give him back equal. Splud, you starveling, you eel skin, you dried neat's tongue, you bull's pizzle, you stockfish. These are all thin things, right? He's calling them all fat things. Oh, for breath to utter what is like thee. You tailor's yard, you sheath, you bowcase, you vile standing tuck. Well, breathe a while, and then to it again. And when thou hast tired thyself in base comparisons, hear me speak but this. Mark, Jack. We too saw you 4 set on 4 and bound them and were masters of their wealth. Mark now how a plain tale shall put you down. Then did we too set on you 4, and with a word outfaced you from your prize, and have it, yea, and can show it you here in the house. And Falstaff, you carried your guts away as nimbly, with as quick dexterity, and roared for mercy, and still run and roared, as ever I heard bull calf. What a slave art thou to hack thy sword as thou hast done, and then say it was in fight. What trick, what device, what starting hole canst thou now find out to hide thee from this open and apparent shame? Points. Come, let's hear, Jack. What trick hast thou now? Falstaff. By the Lord, I knew ye as well as he that made ye. Why, hear you, my masters. Was it for me to kill the heir apparent? Should I turn upon the true prince? Why, thou knowest I'm as valiant as Hercules. But beware, instinct. The lion will not touch the true prince. This is one of the great myths about the hierarchy of the world, that the lion will attack a human being unless he's like the lion royal, and then he won't. Instinct is a great matter. I was now a coward on instinct. I shall think the better of myself and thee during my life, I for a valiant lion, and thou for a true prince. But, by the Lord, lads, I'm glad you have the money. Hostess, clap to the doors. Watch tonight, pray tomorrow. Gallants, lads, boys, hearts of gold. All the titles of good fellowship come to you. What, shall we be merry? Shall we have a play extempore? Content, says the prince, and the argument that is the subject of the play shall be thy running away. No more of that, Hal, and thou lovest me. Enter the hostess. There's someone at the door. They're looking for Falstaff. No, there's someone at the door who's bringing news, and Falstaff goes to see who it is, an old man. Then the prince asks, how you ran away upon instinct, you will not touch the true prince. Bardolph, I ran when I saw others run. How came Falstaff's sword so hacked? Line 293, why, he hacked it with his dagger and said he would swear truth out of England, but he would make you believe it was done in fight and persuaded us to do the like, and to tickle our noses to make them bleed. Now he makes fun of Bardolph for being a drunk. His face is bright colors. Collar, if rightly taken, you're going to make me angry. And Prince, no, if rightly taken, halter, meaning a noose for a thief. Here comes lean Jack, here comes bare bones. How long is it ago, Jack, since thou sawest thine own knee? Line 316. My own knee? When I was about thy years, Hal, I was not an eagle's talent, that's talon, in the waist. I could have crept into any alderman's thumb ring. A plague of sighing and grief. It blows a man up like a bladder. Now, what's the funny part? Is he fat because he's been sighing and grieving? No, because he's been eating and drinking. There's villainous news abroad. Here was Sir John Bracy from your father. You must to the court in the morning. That same mad fellow of the North Percy, and he of Wales that gave Amamon the bastinado, and made Lucifer cuckold, and swore the devil his true liegeman upon the cross of a Welsh hook. What a plague do you call him? Just as Hotspur couldn't remember the name. What name couldn't he remember? Oh, come on. We just read it. Yeah. Not Pomfret. Barclay. Now, Poins can't remember, Falstaff can't remember the name Glendower. Owen the same. And his son-in-law Mortimer in Old Northumberland, that sprightly Scot of Scots Douglas, that runs a horseback up a hill perpendicular. That's the reputation of the Douglas, the Scots fighter, leader of the army of Scotland. Prince, he that rides at high speed and with his pistol kills a sparrow flying. Falstaff, you have hit it, that's the one. Prince, so did he never the sparrow. Well, that rascal hath good mettle in him. He will not run. Prince, why, what a rascal art thou then to praise him so for running? A horseback, ye cuckoo, but afoot he will not budge a foot. Yes, Jack, upon instinct. I grant ye upon instinct. Well, he is there too, and one more dig. All right, so we're going to have war. Tell me, Hal, line 353, art thou not horrible afeard? Thou being heir apparent, could the world pick thee out 3 such enemies again as that fiend Douglas, that spirit Percy, and that devil Glendower? Art thou not horribly afraid? Doth not thy blood thrill at it? Prince, not a whit, in faith. I lack some of thy instinct. Well, thou wilt be horribly chided tomorrow when thou comes to thy father the king. If thou love me, practice an answer. So the prince says, do thou stand for my father and examine me upon the particulars of my life. So you're going to play my father the king. I'm going to play myself. We're going to have a little play. Shall I? Content. This chair shall be my state, meaning the throne, this dagger my scepter, and this cushion my crown. Thy state is taken for a joint stool, thy golden scepter for a leaden dagger, and thy precious rich crown for a pitiful bald crown. Well, says Falstaff, and the fire of grace be not quite out of thee, now shalt thou be moved. Give me a cup of sack to make my eyes look red, that it may be thought I have wept. For I must speak in passion, and I will do it in King Cambyses' vein. I'm going to speak in the old style of an old play called Cambyses. It's going to be all those balanced contradictories, analogies, the euphuistic style, as it's called, of John Lilly and others. Prince, well, here is my leg, he bows, and here is my speech. Stand aside, nobility. The hostess can't contain herself. Oh, Jesu, this is excellent sport and faith. And he treats it as within the play. Weep not, sweet queen. He treats her as the queen. For trickling tears are vain. Oh, the father, how he holds his countenance. For God's sake, lords, convey my tristful queen, for tears do stop the floodgates of her eyes. Oh, Jesu, he doth it like one of these harlotry players as ever I see. And then he breaks character. Peace, good pint pot. Peace, good tickle brain. Enough. Stop interrupting my performance. Hurry. I do not only marvel where thou spendest thy time, but also how thou art accompanied. For though the chamomile, the more it is trodden on, the faster it grows, yet youth, the more it is wasted, the sooner it wears. That thou art my son, I have partly thy mother's word, partly my own opinion, but chiefly a villainous trick of thine eye, and a foolish hanging of thy nether lip that doth warrant me. If then thou be son to me, here lies the point. Why, being son to me, art thou so pointed at? Shall the blessed Son of heaven prove a micher and eat blackberries? A question not to be asked. Shall the Son of England prove a thief and take purses? A question to be asked. There is a thing, Harry, which thou hast often heard of, and it is known to many in our land by the name of pitch. This pitch, as ancient writers do report, doth defile. So doth the company thou keepst. The ancient writers is the Bible, the gospel. Those who touch pitch will be defiled. That's the quotation. And he's making this great long, flowery sentence out of it. There is a thing, Harry, which thou hast often heard of. Meaning, you've been to church on Sunday and heard that those who touch pitch will be defiled. And everybody knows about the caulking that pitch is used for in boats, ships. For Harry, now I do not speak to thee in drink, but in tears, not in pleasure, but in passion, not in words only, but in woes also. And yet, there is a virtuous man whom I have often noted in thy company, but I know not his name. What manner of man, and it like your majesty? A goodly, portly man, in faith, and a corpulent, of a cheerful look, a pleasing eye, and a most noble carriage. And as I think his age some 50, they all laugh. Or by a lady inclining to 60. And now I remember me, his name is Falstaff. If that man should be lewdly given, he deceiveth me. All right, look at the joke there. If Falstaff is lewdly given, he deceives me. As the king speaking, I believe him to be a good guy. But Falstaff is deceiving himself. For Harry, I see virtue in his looks. If then the tree may be known by the fruit, as the fruit by the tree, then peremptorily I speak it, there is virtue in that Falstaff. Him keep with, the rest banish. And tell me now, thou naughty varlet, tell me where hast thou been this month? Now the phrase naughty varlet allows the prince to say, dost thou speak like a king? Do thou stand for me, and I'll play my father. Depose me, says Falstaff. If thou dost it half so gravely, so majestically, both in word and matter, hang me up by the heels for a rabbit sucker or a poulter's hair. Well, here I'm set, says the prince, and here I stand. Judge, my masters. So the prince says, as if the king, now, Harry, whence come you? My noble lord, from Eastcheap. The complaints I hear of thee are grievous. 'Sblood, my lord, they are false. Nay, I'll tickle you for a young prince in faith. Swearest thou, ungracious boy? Because he said 'sblood. You know what that's short for? By God's blood, meaning by Christ's blood. Henceforth ne'er look on me. Thou art violently carried away from grace. There is a devil haunts thee in the likeness of an old fat man. A ton of man is thy companion. Why dost thou converse with that trunk of humours, that bolting hutch of beastliness, that swollen parcel of dropsies, that huge bombard of sack, that stuffed cloak bag of guts, that roasted Manningtree ox with the pudding in his belly, that reverend vice, that grey iniquity, that father ruffian, that vanity in years? Wherein is he good but to taste sack and drink it? Wherein neat and cleanly, but to carve a capon and eat it? Wherein cunning, but in craft? Wherein crafty, but in villainy? Wherein villainous, but in all things? Wherein worthy, but in nothing? I would your grace would take me with you. Whom means your grace? That villainous, abominable misleader of youth, Falstaff, that old white-bearded Satan. My lord, the man I know thou dost. But to say I know more harm in him than in myself were to say more than I know. Okay, what's he saying? He's playing to be the prince, right? To say I know more harm in Falstaff than I know in myself, the prince, is to say more than I know. That he is old, the more the pity, his white hairs do witness it. But that he is, saving your reverence, a whoremaster, that I utterly deny. If sack and sugar be a fault, God help the wicked. If to be old and merry be a sin, then many an old host that I know is damned. If to be fat be to be hated, then Pharaoh's lean kine are to be loved. Kine means cattle. No, my good Lord, you remember the dream of Pharaoh? And Joseph interprets it. The fat kine come out, 7 of them, and then the lean kine, the starving ones, eat them up. And it's a prophecy of the 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And Joseph solves the problem. Okay, so Pharaoh's lean kine are not to be loved. If to be fat be to be hated, then Pharaoh's lean kine are to be loved. No, my good Lord, banish Pt1a, banish Bardolph, banish Poins. But for sweet Jack Falstaff, kind Jack Falstaff, true Jack Falstaff, valiant Jack Falstaff, and therefore more valiant being, as he is, old Jack Falstaff, banish not him thy Harry's company, banish not him thy Harry's company, banish plump Jack, and banish all the world. I do. I will. All right, now, banishing the world is something that somebody who has any spiritual calling must do, right? Turn against worldliness. Okay, banish plump Jack, who stands for the world and is fat and round like the world, and banish all the world. And the prince, in the character of his father in the play, says, I do. But then he says, I will, in his own character. And he will. In the end of part 2, he banishes Falstaff from 10 miles to a 10-mile distance from wherever he happens to be, to show and to mean his transformation. So there's an edge to this, I do, I will. The sheriff comes in, and Falstaff says, don't betray me, hide me, I'm going to hide behind the arras. And he goes behind the arras and promptly falls asleep. The sheriff comes in and says, one of the thieves they're looking for is well known, a gross fat man, as fat as butter, says the carrier. Well, says the prince, I've employed him. Tomorrow at dinner time, I'll send his answer to you. There are 2 gentlemen that have in this robbery lost 300 marks. It may be so, says the prince, if you have robbed these many shall be answerable, and so farewell. Okay, they go out. This oily rascal is known as well as Paul's, meaning St. Paul's Cathedral, the biggest building in London. They go to call him forth. He's sound asleep, snoring. They pick his pockets, and they find a list, tavern papers. Line 518, item, a capon, 2 shillings, 2pence. Item, sauce, 4 shillings, 4 pence. Item, sack, 2 gallons, 5 shillings, 8 pence. Anchovies and sack after supper, 2 shillings, 6 pence. Bread, halfpenny. OB stands for obelus, which is half a penny. Oh, monstrous, says the prince, but 1 halfpenny worth of bread to this intolerable deal of sack? There let him sleep till day. All to the court in the morning. We must all to the wars, and thy place shall be honorable. I'll procure this fat rogue a charge of foot. The way you could get out of jail, and the way you could get out of accusation by the sheriff or police or the crown or even the church, is to go fight for the king. So he's going to get him a job in the army, and he's going to thereby spring him from the sheriff's clutches, but make him serve. The money shall be paid back again with advantage. That means interest. That's the truth about Prince Hal. He took the money from Falstaff And he knows it's been stolen, but he's going to repay it. And he's going to repay it, not just repay it, but repay it with interest. But we're going to war in the morning. That's going to change everything. We have to get serious. Okay, what time is it? Got a few more minutes. Let's pause here for a moment and see if you have questions for me. I've been doing a lot of reading, but there's no better way to make you see the fun of these speeches than just to hear them, I think. If you disagree with me and want me to talk more about them, I will. Yes?
Do we ever know how Falstaff came by his knighthood?
No, we don't know. We're not ever actually told. There were two kinds of knighthood. There were carpet knights and there were fighting knights. So you could get a knighthood by fighting a battle and winning, and it was your reward. So you could be raised to that level. But you could also do something for the crown, loan them money or make some connection they needed made or whatever. In other words, some service to the crown. And then you could be knighted as a carpet knight, like Sir Andrew Aguecheek in Twelfth Night. Rewarded with knighthood, but not because you're really a fighter. Sir Andrew is not a fighter. Neither is Sir John Falstaff. Now, Falstaff does give 2 blows before he runs away. So there was a time when maybe he was a fighter and maybe he got his knighthood legitimately, but there's no evidence that he has any real fighting spirit in him. And by the end of the play, it's even more obvious and funnier, but also tragic, as you'll see, or at least dark. Yeah. He's given a mission to get a bunch of soldiers and take them to the war. And he succeeds in preserving his own skin and getting them all killed. And there's a kind of darkness there, which is why the prince has to banish him in the end. He cannot let Falstaff run the country through him, or even think he's running the country.
Just totally rejects him in the end. Right?
Not totally, no. He gives him something to live on
Okay.
so that he doesn't have to be a
He
thief.
He doesn't really take him under his wing.
No, there's no hope for Falstaff in that sense. He's unredeemable in that sense. But Hal spends the whole play trying to get him to take responsibility and shape up, and he doesn't do it.
Is that why royalty is going away?
Is that why? I'm afraid there are a lot more reasons than
I
that.
know that, but that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I don't know. That's too big a question. I don't know if I can answer that. And when it has to do with the whole change in the concept of the nature of man. When we think of the world as horizontal and not hierarchical, vertical, then royalty loses its authenticity or its authority. And that's largely a good thing under the government of the rules set up by our founding fathers, but it can also be a terrible thing if the substitute for the king is a mob, and that's always a danger. Other questions? All right, well, we have, let's say, well, we don't have, we're pretty much out of time. Okay, I was hoping to get through the next scene, but there's no way, so we'll start with Act 3, Scene 2 on what? On Tuesday. Let's, let me make sure that we're all aware. Hold on one second. Where is my schedule? There it is. Okay, so today's the 27th, so we meet March 3rd, and then we skip, and we meet again after that on March 12th. So we'll finish this play on March 3rd, God willing, if I can move it along. Yes?
Do we know what Hotspur was doing during the last play? Is he, how many years have passed?
Yeah, some years have passed. He was young.
Didn't he
This-
meet Richard II
Yeah.
as a young boy in that play?
Yeah. But Shakespeare plays with time, so it's not, I mean, Mortimer is the conflation of two different people, and Hotspur has also got elements of a different generation. So Shakespeare plays with time a little bit in order to make the characters pointed. But for the purposes of this play, he was young when he met Richard and not responsible. And he's blaming his father and his uncle for running over to Bolingbroke so quickly against Richard. But he wasn't conscious of how bad Richard was at the time. Or he's conveniently forgotten for the purposes of this play. Yeah. All right, my dears, I will see you Tuesday.